Welcome to Backstory with Joan Goldstein. I'm Joan Goldstein. The guest today is a very, very important and special contributor to our community. His name is Dr. Drew Dyson, and he is the new director for the Princeton Senior Resource Center, known as Suzanne Patterson Senior Resource Center. And everybody is curious about him. What does he want to bring to this already very successful and wonderful center that Susan Hoskins has kept alive for so many years? So this is going ahead, and what did you want to share? What do you want us to know? And you had used a very important term, didn't you? So looking forward, right?
Right. Well, first, thank you very much, Joan, for having me on your show and an opportunity just to have this conversation. When I think about the Princeton Senior Resource Center, one of the things that I think about is the legacy that Susan Hoskins and others have built through the last 40 years plus of serving the senior community in the community of Princeton. And so I want to be able to build on that legacy while at the same time looking forward and expanding. And I think someone who steps into a successful organization, someone who steps into follow someone who's done extremely well in expanding what the Princeton Senior Resource Center has offered to the community, has to do so with both an eye towards the past and knowing and understanding the legacy and the growth that's happened, but also an eye towards the future and being able to see the directions that we might go together as we continue to build on that legacy in new ways.
It's wonderful. It's great wisdom. By the way, your backstory is that you were born in Princeton and that your father was a minister in Princeton, and he was a minister at the Methodist Church, and your mother was a geriatric social worker.
That's
so you're
right.
coming from a family culture that cares about people and wants to help people. And that's kind of built into your thinking, isn't it? It doesn't come out of nowhere.
Absolutely. From my earliest years here in Princeton and being born at the time when my father was the pastor of the Methodist Church down on Nassau Street, and then through watching both my father and mother's careers developed to focus on geriatric care and senior care in different ways. My mother is a social worker, my father directing a series of communities for older adults in and around Philadelphia. And so when I had an opportunity to think about this position and think about building on the legacy that Susan Hoskins had built here in Princeton, it really was a way for me to live into the legacy of my parents as well and the work that they have done and what they taught me as important values. And so that's an important part of what I bring to this work that we do together.
This is wonderful. Now, share with us, what sort of things do you see moving ahead, and what sort of things will you want to do?
Absolutely. So when I think about the future that we have together as an organization, one of the things that I think has really been a strong asset of what PSRC has done is social services and all of the varied social services that we offer through our presence not only at Suzanne Patterson, but also at Spruce Circle and the presence there by offering access to resources, helping older adults manage and navigate the resources that are available to support them in aging in place and being comfortable in the community that we are living together. And so one of the things that I'd like to see is an expansion of that social services arm, having more social work presence, having more groups and opportunities for people to come together to learn from one another and to develop relationship with one another as they seek to navigate thriving in their senior years.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, with the old folk song, the times they are a-changing. And you're looking at that, how times are changing. One is the demographics, that there are many more senior citizens than in other generations. Why? Because the baby boomers are becoming seniors and they're moving into that world.
Right.
And enlarging, but also expanding the differences in life experiences. And as you've pointed out to me, they don't all recognize each other as being from the same world.
Right, that's absolutely true. As we see the baby boomers retiring and the differences of what their careers look like versus people who were part of the greatest generation, the generation before the baby boomers. And now you have an expansion as life expectancy expands,
True.
as the baby boomers are the largest generation to date to enter into this time of post-retirement. Now you have how do you build levels of understanding? So one area that I point to with this is the area of technology. We have a technology lab that serves people and gives people an opportunity to come and learn how to use their devices and to come and have support from trained people, no matter what they're trying to do, and that's a great asset to our community. When people come into the technology lab, we have people on the extreme of, I just got a new phone, help me learn how to turn it on and to take a picture, all the way to people who have retired in the last 5 to 10 years who spent their entire careers immersed in technology. So they're more interested in what's the latest, what's the newest, because once they stepped out of their career, they may have lost some of the contact with the technology that was part of their lives for the last 20 or 30 years. And so that's one example of people coming together across generations and understanding the expanse that the generations have, and how we can build that understanding.
And that's really significant. And also, as you mentioned to me, accepting and understanding each other. There are going to be differences. You grow up in a generation, I grew up in a generation that knew a war.
Right.
You see, that's marked some of my memories, it's marked some of my perceptions about life and family. And yet, and the baby boomers were the post-war generation, so they were the times when people were moving to suburbs, when suddenly we're having housing outside of cities and small communities. Life changed drastically after the war, and some of the technology that was discovered during the war became part of life afterwards. So we had television,
Right.
We had so many things. And does that shape us to think differently? I know I teach a college sociology course at the Lewis School, and these are students who are 17, 18 years old. And the first time I met with them this time is the first time I had a cane to walk with, and that's because I had an injury to my leg. And I thought, now, how am I going to get them to see me as someone like them, you see? And I'm walking in with this cane. So I'm not going to be silent about it. I'm going to put it up front. So I said to the class, okay, held up the cane, make up a story. Why do I have a cane? And this kid got the message, and he said, that's because you climb Mount Everest. And I said, that's right. I climbed Mount Everest, and that's why I have a cane. And we all laughed. But see, it was no like, well, she can't understand us because she's walking with a cane. Now we know that we can connect, you see.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the same thing can happen with the senior generations.
I think that's one of the greatest things that we need in our culture and in our communities now is understanding of one another. And I think when I talk about how we can move forward as a senior center, I think that is part of what value we can bring to the community, is bringing people together to learn one another's stories, to understand the value in the stories that people bring from different generations. And that's not only among the baby boomers and greatest generation and those who are retired now, but it's also intergenerational. How do we bring on the younger generations into that realm of understanding? So your story of the school is a great story of how you do that, because all of a sudden that breaks down barriers, a perceived barrier of age or a perceived barrier of ability when you walk in with a cane. And the way you build understanding with one another is to get to know your story. And so I want to foster an environment where people get to know the stories of the people that they're taking a class with. They get to know the stories of the people that they're learning from, because that will build understanding in a climate and in a culture where there seems to be a lack of that these days. Definitely. That we can do that together.
That's beautiful, yes. You know that I teach at the Evergreen Forum at the Senior Center, and it's a course I developed a few years back called Building Acceptance of Diversity. And each time I focused on something different, race, ethnicity, and this year it was gender. And one thing I like to do is, the very, very beginning, ask the students in the room, why did you take this course? Who are they? Who's in this room? Why are they here? And it was so informative. It was so revealing that in their families, they had people who were different, and they were trying to find understanding and help. And it made a huge difference for them and for me. You know, why are you here? Why are you taking this course? And that's what you have to do. You have to say, who are the people in the room? And not only that, but from my own training as an educator, to teach is to learn.
Absolutely.
So you learn from your students as much as they learn from you. And therefore you see them as equals. And that's kind of the environment you want to create.
Right. One of the best things that I learned from my mother as a geriatric social worker was the art of being curious about another person. And so one of the things that she taught me is how I interact with people is to find out about them. So often people go into conversations wanting to share their own perspective, wanting to push their own, what they're trying to accomplish. But by being curious in a conversation, I'm building a bridge. I'm building a relationship with someone else and building a way to understand someone else. And so even if we ultimately disagree on a topic, let's say, we still have that bridge of understanding because I took time to be curious about you and about how you came to your perspective and what shaped you and what formed you. And that's the type of environment I want to form, whether it's among our staff at the Resource Center, our staff and others in the community, or among the participants themselves.
How would you suggest you do this? You see, how do you I know some of your staff, they're wonderful people, just
Right.
wonderful. How do you do this?
I think part of it is I model in the staff meeting. When we gather as a staff, I always talk about finding out about one another's stories. So we'll ask very simple things about, what was the first job that you ever had? What was the first big trip that you ever took in your life? And just that level of understanding and conversation that breaks down barriers of, this is my job, this is your job, this is your job. And so we try and do that as a staff so that then that models for how I interact with the participants. So when somebody comes in and I'm meeting somebody for the first time, I'll ask them about their background. What brings you to teach at Evergreen Forum? What's the background that you bring into that teaching role? What brings you to participate in this class? What interests you about this TED Talk that we shared that you wanted to come and be a part of this conversation? And the staff does the same thing. And I've learned from our staff that they do that all the time. They're constantly interacting with folks, not just about the topic or about what we're doing, but also just curiosity about the individual.
Yeah. It's so basic, and yet it's so not practiced, is it?
Right.
Yeah, it's people and understanding and communication. And there's some group that I attended where some woman came in and said, oh, I have a hearing problem, but then she proceeded to talk only about herself. And I thought, no, she has a listening problem, not a hearing problem. She's not curious about anybody.
Right.
About her.
Right.
So that's a very interesting thing. Well, okay, so you mentioned a few things to me that it kind of, let's see, it was about families. We have to remember that the people coming here have families. They have descendants. And they may have problems of the modern generation, and these parents, grandparents, have to help the family. So
Right.
you want to help them as well, don't you?
Absolutely. As I think about new directions for us, we understand, for instance, let's just take an example. We understand that in our state, we're facing an addiction epidemic, and that has impacted the lives of individuals, but I also know it impacts deeply the grandparents of those individuals. And how do grandparents deal with that loss? Because so often it's the individual and the parent, perhaps, that are right in the midst of that, but the grandparent is equally connected and needs some resources. How can I understand my grandchild with addiction? How can I support my child who's dealing with their child who's dealing with addiction? So I think in the way that our culture supports a whole family system, we have to understand that family systems look different. At one time, they were all nuclear in the same area, but now they might be much more spread out. And so we have grandparents who have grandchildren who are dealing with this 3 states away, but still are emotionally tied into that. And so how can we offer support? How can we offer some guidance and some helpful tools to be able to deal with that issue, as an example? But there are many other contemporary issues that we deal with as well that we can support and help people to deal with on their own.
What sort of contemporary issues would you say?
So let's say we also have one of the things that I value and that's most important to me is the worth of every individual. And so there's a contemporary conversation about the LGBTQIA community and how we understand that, and people who are senior adults who may have grandchildren who have come out or other things. How do we help build understanding? Because yes, there's difference generationally, but ultimately I want to get to a place where I can support grandparents to love and embrace their grandchildren for the fullness of who they are and come to understand and appreciate. So there's many different ways that building understanding and relationship covers the full gamut of the human experience.
You have a lot to offer. What made you make before you were doing this, what were you doing? You were a minister? Or?
I was serving as what's called the district superintendent in my denomination, and that means I was supervising approximately 70 churches, 70 different congregations all over the central part of New Jersey. And my youngest daughter is now a freshman. She just finished her freshman year of college today. Actually, was her last exam of her freshman year. So as she was preparing for her freshman year, it was an opportunity for my wife and I to think about what's next for us. And so I began to work with people thinking about the nonprofit world and to bring my executive experience from the ecclesial realm into the nonprofit realm. And that's when I came across PSRC. And there were so many things. This is my 4th time back at Princeton. I did 2 degrees at the theological school and was born here, so I keep coming back. So Princeton has a draw, but also the Princeton Senior Resource Center has such an incredible story and legacy. It was something I was drawn to be a part of. So went through the interview process, and I'm excited to be at the helm as we move forward.
We live in such a difficult world.
Right, okay.
And there's so much violence. There's shootings in schools, attacks in religious centers. This is a difficult world for us to live in. What can we do to help people?
That's a great question, because I think there are the challenges that are grand challenges for the culture as a whole. There are challenges in our local communities, and there are challenges within the individual. One of the things people working in the aging field know is that post-retirement for some people creates a fear about that. What does that look like? Where will my value come from? Where would I be able to add? So there's very personal challenges and questions that people are asking as well. And I think ultimately what we want to create is places where individuals know that they have a place where they're safe, they have a place where they belong to a community of other individuals, and they have a place where they can have value. One of the things that I love about the Senior Resource Center is that we not only have places for people to come and be a part of something, whether they're learning or whether they're participating in a class, but we also offer ways for people to serve other people. You know, one of the things we know from psychology is one of the questions in older adult years is, what will my value be now? How can I invest in something that's bigger than myself? And so whether it's our program called Grand Pals, where we have readers who go into the schools to read with kindergarten students every week, every year, or it's a program that we have called Home Friends, which simply gives people an opportunity to become companions and friends with people that they will visit on a regular basis and go to their home and just check in on them and build a relationship, a friendship through that Home Friends program. We want to offer ways for people to feel like they are contributing to society, not only reacting to it.
Yeah, that's an important thing. People always ask me why I'm, teaching at the Evergreen Forum and teaching at the Lewis School, and I said, well, because that's what I have to offer.
Right.
And it feels good to offer. And it's wonderful to see that people enjoy and like what you're doing, because that makes me feel good. And I understand also that I learn from them. As I say, to teach is to learn.
Right.
You listen to others, you understand others, you help as well as helping yourself, because there's no end to the question of understanding. It's, it's one of the, what was it in sociology, Verstehen, right? It's the German term for understanding.
Right.
And that was one of the key terms in sociology that I loved, Verstehen, you understand people. And this is what our society needs. And someone that, like you, is bringing that into the senior center. You see me coming there. I'm there quite often. And
we love to have you there.
I love coming there, and it's always exciting. It's always wonderful. And I've made friends and love listening to people. So, and at the same time, I love working with the teenagers,
Right.
you see. And everything enlarges my compassion, my empathy for others, and that's what I value. And that's what it sounds like you're moving us towards that.
Absolutely.
Well, any last thoughts before we say goodbye?
Well, again, thank you for this opportunity to be in conversation. And I just want to again acknowledge the legacy that we have as the Princeton Senior Resource Center, but also to say there is a chapter that is just beginning that will lead us into new places. So we encourage people who are watching or people who have been a part of the Senior Resource Center to keep coming back, because there's going to be good things that are happening and ways that will expand our programming and our groups and our services that we offer, that we look forward to sharing with others and building understanding and building value and building worth to contribute to the community, not only to be takers, but to be givers. That was another value that I learned from my parents, is how do you learn to be a giver to the community? So we want to be an avenue through which people can give to the community here in Princeton.
And I think I should say it's located right on Nassau Street. The address has two addresses, interesting. Is number 1 Monument Drive?
Correct.
And also, 45 Stockton?
45 Stockton
Street. And it's right off of Nassau Street. When you see these giant stone monuments, then you know that you turn in there, and the senior center, where we go up the steps, and that's where you are. So anyone who's not sure where it is or how to find it, it's pretty easy. It's pretty outstanding.
And you can always call us. You can look at our website, which is princetonsenior.org. And I would also say we are a community nonprofit. And so we know that over 80% of our funding comes from donors in the community, individuals and grants and corporations. And so we rely on the support of generous people who help us to do what we do. And so if you're watching today and you have an interest in supporting the work that we do, you can volunteer, you can give, you can be a part of our mission in many different ways.
Well, Dr. Drew Dyson, it's been a joy to talk with you. We're really on the same page, aren't we?
We are.
And this is a beautiful part about people's lives. And I like what you said about giving as well as taking. I think everyone needs to understand that we all need. And therefore, if others give, we get. And this is what you're trying to enlarge, because it was already there, but you're enlarging on it. You're opening it up to a wider and broader population. So, Dr. Drew Dyson, thank you for coming today to Backstory with Joan Goldstein. Goodbye.